Okay, I just want YouTube to recognize that I'm currently live right now. There we go. This video is for the skeptics in the skeptic community who are religious. I know for some people, they're in situations where they do believe in God, where they do believe their power. However, they're skeptical about certain things within their religion, like miracles or whatever. And they can show the skeptical side of them. They can show the skepticism that they have, because it might get them ostracized by their religious communities, or it might get them, might get someone to make them feel awful about themselves because they're skeptical about certain things and all that. And this video is basically for skeptical believers, the skeptical believer. Reasons to be a skeptical believer. This is coming from someone who's an atheist. However, you could be a religious person and still be skeptical. Tip 1, or reason number 1 to be a skeptical believer: if you're well educated, and I assume if you're watching this video, you are. If you're well educated, you know, obviously, that Jonah didn't live inside a whale's stomach for 3 days. You know that certain things in the Bible, like Jesus touching a blind man and then suddenly he's like, can see again. But you know that's all hogwash. You know that's not true. You know blindness is inherent, or it's caused by certain factors of life, poor diets, or so on and so forth. And you know that whales, humans, any animal, any reptile in the animal kingdom has amino acids in their digestive systems. So obviously you know that Jonah would have been whale food. And you obviously know that you can't just touch someone and they go whoop, from blind to, oh, look, I see a tree. You know that's not possible. And when you are skeptical about that stuff, when you know that stuff didn't happen, it's okay to say that didn't happen. Admit that certain things, even though you believe in God, Muhammad, whatever, right? Just admit, at a certain point in your holy books, you got to admit to people, this didn't happen. This has no scientific base to back this up. This did not happen. Okay? So that's really the first tip, or reason number 1 to be a skeptical believer. Call out stuff you know that's nonsense. Reason number 2. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know. This is a hard one. Even there are skeptical believers out there, but it's okay to publicly admit that you don't know. I'm an atheist. On a technicality, I'm also an agnostic atheist, meaning I don't see the proof for a God right now. However, If I die and there's a heaven, there's an afterlife, I know I'm wrong. However, it's okay to be a agnostic theist and also admit, well, we could be wrong. There could be nothing after death. It's okay to admit when you're wrong. Reason number 3, tip number 3. When you come out as a religious skeptic or a religious skeptical believer, or a skeptic believer, if you want to put it that way, first, come out to your friends, your close friends, whether they be on Facebook, coworkers, whoever. Say it to them first, because they're less likely to judge you than, let's just say, your family, who might be hardcore believers. And because the more you make it public with people you work with or people you are close friends with, the easier it will be for the hearing the reaction from your parents or family. That's tip number 3, reason number 3. Reason number 4, tip number 4, whatever. If you're going to believe and be skeptical, a big key component is separating religion from science. A literal mental separation of church and state. Because, once again, if you're watching this, you're most likely well educated. Like I mentioned with my first tip. However, it's really hard to separate religion from the science part, because growing up, you probably were ingrained that because of God or whatever you believe in, science is correlated with that. And if you're at this point where you're a skeptical believer, obviously you know that they're not correlated. But when you have conversation, and normally you probably respond with, well, God will help, and so on and so forth, right? You got to learn how to separate the science from the religion. Now, if you're if you're talking to someone and saying, well, I'm having financial problems at the moment, then you could say something like, well, God will lend his hand to you and fortune will be coming your way, something like that, right? However, if you're having a conversation that deals with climate change and that deals with something where religion shouldn't intervene, that's where you separate it. That's where the science side of your brain should turn on, and the religious side should kind of shut the altar door until you go back to the altar for whatever reason you have to go back to the altar for. Finally, reason 5, to be a skeptical believer, or tip number 5, to be a skeptical believer, don't force yourself to this point so quickly. Look, being critical of religion and being a believer is okay. Like I said, there are skeptical believers. Skeptics aren't only atheists and agnostics. Skeptics are also religious people too. However, if you're not comfortable with getting to this point so soon, don't force yourself. Because it could have psychological effects on you. And the reason why I say that is because it's even with people who force themselves into atheism really fast. Sometimes depression kicks in. Sometimes a sense of loneliness kicks in. Sometimes like a sense of dreadfulness kicks in. Well, it's the same thing if you're a skeptical believer, or at least flirting with the idea. Don't force yourself too quickly to be a skeptical believer. For some people, if you're watching this video, you're already at that door and you just need that extra push. You need that confidence push to get you to say, I believe in God, but I'm also a skeptic of certain things with religion. However, if you're also watching this video, you're probably flirting with the idea of skeptical believer, or at least how to think like it. And all I can tell you is don't force yourself. By all means, I do encourage you still flirting with the idea of skeptical believer, or at least becoming one, but gradually move yourself towards that position, because you don't want to give yourself depression. You don't want to give yourself some sense of worthlessness. You don't want to give yourself a sense of dread. You really want to get to that point where you're comfortable with saying, I'm a skeptical believer. Now, I gave you all the best tips and reasons to be a skeptical believer, but I, as an atheist, can't really give you any more information. But that's up to you. The next steps are up to you. I can only encourage. See you guys.